The topics and opinions expressed on the following show are solely those of the hosts and their guests and not those of W4WN Radio, its employees, or affiliates. We make no recommendations or endorsements for radio show programs, services, or products mentioned on air or on our web. No liability, explicit or implied, shall be extended to W4WN Radio, its employees, or affiliates. Any questions or comments should be directed to those show hosts. Thank you for choosing W4WN Radio.
And welcome to Chasing Purpose. I'm your host, Kathleen Connor, and if this is your first time here, I am so glad you found your way in, and I hope you stay a while. If you've been here before, well, you know the drill. Welcome back. And today, it's such a great topic I'm going to share with you today, and it's going to sound painful, but I want you to know you're the problem. You are the problem, and so am I, and so was I, and so were you, because it's going to be past tense. So we're not the victim anymore. We have to realize what role we have in our lives and in our relationships. So we're going to dive into that today. It's going to unpack a lot of things, and you may need a drink and certainly a pen and paper because you're going to want to take some notes. So I think what we do in our lives and what we've done in our lives for a long time is that we tend to look at others and judge them and analyze them and focus on their behaviors, their conversations, their reaction to things, their patterns of what they're repeating. And we talk about them. And that's not what we should be doing. The more time we focus on them, the less time we get to grow within ourselves. So as we're watching, and we have so many, our worlds and our words have evolved. We have so many things and places and challenges and different things that we can bring into our thoughts. And we have to realize, again, I'm not clinically trained. Sure, I'm a certified life coach, but that doesn't give me the certification or the education behind this stuff. But our society and our social vernacular has tended to make us feel and sound clinical. We tend to dissect everyone else's behavior within a matter of minutes, right? Their energy, their shortcomings, their triggers, or their stances. We tend to judge other people, and it becomes a very expensive hobby to us. Not costly as far as monetary, but it costs us the time that we're looking at them, that we're not choosing our own growth, and we cannot see ourselves clearly because we're busy watching other people. And it's easy to label others because we're afraid to do our own work. And we built an entire vocabulary, and society and our culture has allowed us to do that, of what people are doing and what they're doing wrong. We label them as toxic, gaslighting, narcissists, trauma responses, unhealed wounds, emotional unavailability. Now we have the attachment styles and connections and all of the diagnosis that we can give to others, strangers, from a 3-minute conversation or even a glance in a restaurant or in an event, that we are so afraid to look within ourselves. And I believe that I heard this once through a friend, and it really stuck with me, that we're all on the mental health spectrum, right? We use the spectrum and we think about ADHD and learning disabilities and those types of things, but we have to look at it also on an emotional spectrum. Like, we all ride the roller coaster of emotions with any relationship. I often say that within relationships, there are peaks and there are valleys, and you hope to stay at the peaks a lot longer than you do within the valleys. But when you're in those valleys, yes, it can seem cold and dark and all of those things, but that's when growth happens. That's where we can build ourselves and go to the light and to the sunshine and to the peak to bring ourselves back. But we have to go through all of the peaks and emotions, and life isn't linear, and neither are the things and our experiences within the emotions that we have. So I want want to be clear that the language exists because the experience names it, right? The pain is real, the behavior is somewhat bad or unfavorable. People are generally let each other down in a lot of ways, and they can do real damage. And hopefully, they're not choosing it consciously to hurt somebody consciously. Hopefully, it's just their patterns and that they can be changed. So, I'm not arguing with anything that we have done. Again, it makes us who we are. What I'm maybe just looking at is how we can do it differently. And that's what we need to do, is to show up differently. And we've gotten so good at analyzing what everybody else has become that we've completely stopped analyzing and stopped growing within ourselves. As women, every single day, we look at a reflection in the mirror. We look at ourselves before we go outside or as we're getting ready. And we look at our clothes and our appearances and the colors that we choose or the styles that we wear, but we don't look at ourselves. I often have to pause and look at myself, and I want to really stare at myself in the eye and my reflection and how I'm presenting myself with my energy. And I think that's the most authentic thing that we can do. And one of the most powerful things that we can say is, how am I going to show up today for myself? For being in a situation and in a relationship? How do I turn that reflection and that lens around and stop focusing on other people and turn it around to myself and ask myself, what role do I have in my day, in my relationships, in my situation? And you can often say that other people have an influence in your moods and in your behaviors. Perhaps they do, perhaps they should, but not overly. You still have control and full control of your destiny, your words, your posture, your triggers, right? Those are the types of things. And so we have to circle back to how we approach those things, how we find our way around it, and what we do with each other. And I'm going to bring you back to David, the therapist I had for years, who I absolutely loved. And he was my first therapist that I really migrated towards and worked hard on some childhood stuff. And we peeled back the onion, as we said, we peeled back the onion. And David had a term that he used that I love. And in that time in your therapy and in my therapy, it was appropriate. It seems harsh now, but it was dealing with childhood stuff. And he would say, laughing now because I can, because of all the work and time and pain and growth I went through, he would say, if it's not one thing, it's your mother. Because everything is brought back to your childhood when you're first going through therapy, right? You're figuring out your past patterns and where they came from. And we, as adults, tend to repeat those patterns until we realize why we're getting those patterns repeating around us and for us. We find ourselves in the same type of relationship with the same type of partner, with the same type of boss, with the same type of career experience, because we need to learn something from it. We need to break the pattern and not skip over it. And unless we realize, and again, have that aha moment about why we're feeling the cycle, the circle, the loop, around here we go again, we're going to go around again. And it's going to be just as exhausting, just as emotional, and maybe just as costly, right? Through therapy, it can be financially costly, it can be emotionally draining, it can certainly be financially and time commitment as well. And we wonder why the same story keeps happening in different cities, and different people, and in different faces. The universe will keep presenting you and me with the same lesson until we learn from it. The same faces, same feelings, different faces, same zip codes, same lessons. So everything still adds up. We need to break the patterns of stuff so that we can learn new things. Be aware of how we can stop the old patterns and how we default for them. And so I had a situation with my mother, and I think I talked about it before, was that I was asking her to show up differently for me. I was asking her to present herself in a mother role that I needed her to be, that I wanted her to be. She didn't understand my independence, my need and desire for change or for growth or for leaving the house or for not living the life that she wanted me to live. And instead of course, my way of trying to explain to her who I was to be more independent, be more rebellious, be more emphatic with my choices and with my convictions, louder, brasher. I don't know if it was disobedient. Perhaps she thought it was. I wasn't doing anything to harm her or to harm myself. I was still making good decisions, and the decisions that were right for me, perhaps she just didn't understand them. And so until I got to the place in our relationship and the relationship with my mother that I had to realize, what role was I playing in the dynamics with her, that I was so angry and so disappointed and so hurt as a little girl, still as an adult, but feeling the little girl feelings, that she wasn't the mother that I needed or wanted, the nurturing, the caring. She was in her own way, just not what I needed for myself and for my mother. And yet I tried to force her to be that, as she tried to force me to be somebody that she wanted me to be. So it wasn't really working out for us. So until David and I peeled back the onion layer by layer by layer by layer, and I realized, and with his help, and with my voice here, I'm hopefully helping you, is that how do you and how did I show up in that relationship? That my forcing my independence on her, or my rebellion onto her, and my behaviors onto her didn't make her comfortable. It made her more uncomfortable with me, made her more nervous about what she didn't understand. And until I softened, and again, I was never a harsh person. I was never an unkind and uncaring daughter, that's for sure. But until I released that role of wanting to maybe prove something to her, or to show her something, and to be differently for her, again, that's that word again, that it's different to show up being someone different than it is different to show up being somebody more, right? So we're going to stick with that. So until I realized that I didn't need to change her, I didn't need to have her be somebody else, that all I really needed and wanted was to respect and understand and love her for who she was and the skills that she could bring to the table into the relationship. Yes, they weren't abundant. Her toolbox wasn't full of everything and anything that I needed, but it's what she had. And I had to embrace that. And I had to let go of all the expectations and all my wants and needs from her as a mom that she couldn't deliver to me. Again, not saying she was a bad mom. She was a great mom in her own way. And that's what we have to think about with any relationship, professional or personal or nurturing on a motherly relationship, how we participate with the tools that we have, right? So I have a teenage son, and I can't expect him to have the emotional capacity of someone who hasn't had the life experiences to have all the tools to have that emotional capacity. I have to love him, respect him, and understand him from what he can bring to the table, as well as I want him to love, respect, and understand me for what I can bring to the table. So what we're doing today is we're going to peel back some situations that I've come into some experiences with some people that I know, and some situations that I've been involved with, that people have told me things over the years, and people tend to tell me things, and I hope it's because they trust me, and to give them advice, or to be a great listener or an active listener, or just kind of be there for them as a presence. And so I often hear things from people. I often have people tell me about their career, their life, and how their experiences, that they tend to have a job and they keep a job, they tend to move up the ladder, and then something happens and they get in a disagreement, or they feel as though someone doesn't like them. And so they tend to almost have a self-sacrificing or a situation where they inevitably coach themselves out of the role of that position or that company, or they just leave. And then they find themselves in another cycle. It can last, again, these cycles can last, doesn't last a year or a month, it could last several years or a decade within relationships. We all know, we've all been, probably most of us have been in long-term relationships or long-term careers or situations, and we've have long-term relationships, of course, with our family, with our parents and our siblings. And so we know the cycle that we've been through. I've now lived away from my childhood home longer than I was a child in the home. So I left when I was 21. I have now been away for 30 years. And so I have experienced life outside of my childhood home more than I have experienced my life inside that childhood home. Yet, when I go back home, again, I call it home still. See, there's the pattern that when I go back to my childhood house, and I can tend to, if I don't watch it, fall back into the role of the 12-year-old little sister, right? And so it's easy to slide back into familial roles and into things that feel habit drawn, especially in a big family. You tend to just get absorbed by the roles and the people and the comfort of that. And I think we do with relationships, especially long-term ones. We tend to feel a role, a shift in how we should be and perform the duty, the love, not in passion, but in responsibility, right? And friendships and those types of things. We tend to slide. I have friends that I've known for my whole life and years from back east, and I don't have to talk to them every day. I don't have to talk to them every 6 months. And I know when I see them, I can go back to our old friendships, our silly laughter, our silly games, our childhood giggles that we used to have, because that's the commonality and that's the connection that we have, nor right or wrong. I love those people. I care for them deeply. But it's great to fall back into those roles when they're healthy, right? When they're not healthy, you're still being treated and still acting like a 12-year-old little sister or daughter. That's not a healthy situation when you're a powerful, empowering female or person that you can be. So you have to really watch where you cycle there and realize that you come to any relationship you can as the problem, and we have to stop that pattern and stop being the victim. We have to stop doing those things. My son has often and always, it seems like in his life, played sports, team sports, some individual sports, but mostly team sports. And with sports come, the parental circles that are involved: lacrosse, basketball, flag football, golf, let's see, karate, all kinds of things that we have given him and allowed him the opportunity to learn as much and experience as much as he can, as we hope to give our kids that. And so, like, musical instruments and all of those types of things. As a parent, I always wanted my son to have the opportunity to be of service. So, he had to be of service, play an instrument, or play a sport. Those were the things, those were the choices that I wanted him to make. And so I gave him the opportunities. We gave him the opportunities to choose those things. He could be a Boy Scout if he wanted to. He could do volunteer work if he wanted to. He could play an instrument. And all of those things we tried. We volunteered. We did lots of things. We played the piano and tried other instruments as well. And sports. But with the sports cycles or cultures, there are certain, parental roles and cultures that come along with that. And so as a parent, you also have to navigate through that. You have to see the relationships and the situations that occur. And it's often interesting to see how things unfold within those groups, and to be more observant. And I think as you observe yourself and not try to be a victim in those, or play a role in some kind of behavioral negative situation, that we can all have a better opportunity and a better place for them. So so we have to just realize, and I'm going to say it again today, that we are the problem, and we're the problem until we're not. And until we realize and identify that we can change being the problem in any situation, that we can not be the 12-year-old girl and we can be the adult. And every once in a while, again, I learned this from David, that the little girl inside of us or the little boy inside of us is always going to be there, right? We have to respect and appreciate that. And that when they have their feelings hurt, that's when the patterns come out. That's when we become the victim, right? That's when they want us they want to be loud. They want to act like a child. They want to have those controlling behaviors, or maybe a temper tantrum or a pouting type of situation, or those types of things. They want to be manipulative and controlling. That's what kids do, right? That's what humans do, until we realize that we don't need to, right? We don't need to do those things anymore. Every relationship, every job, every new thing, some part of that needs to be independent of the little girl. She still will always be somewhat involved, and you have to respect her, but you don't need to have her stand forward and be the loudest one, the poutiest one, the one demanding change from anybody. You can constantly put your arm around her, push her behind you, and say you have it as the adult, and take a stand to say that I'm not going to play the victim. I'm not going to try to force change with somebody else. I'm going to be the change, and realize that I am the problem with how I'm standing up every day within my relationship. So that's what we need to do. And that's what I'm here to try to tell you, and to hope that you hear me say, is that we need to realize that what we need to be and what we're looking for from other people is what we need to be and give ourselves, right? There were times in my life where I wanted admiration and validation and the compliments from people, especially relationships. And they're certainly nice to hear, of course. But what's great is that I don't need them anymore. I don't, yes, of course, I would love to hear somebody complimented me on something. And I took it as a great, gracious thank you. And I was appreciative of that. But I didn't need it, and I don't go seeking it. And when it comes, it's a lot more gratifying. I don't have to stand and shine loud or be the loudest person, and to try to be, I don't know, all things to all people. I just need to be that for me. So I just wanted to say that in all situations, I've had people come to me in different situations, and especially female groups. It seems as though things never changed since we were in high school, that there's always that like rolling of eyes of somebody, or somebody says something to somebody or about somebody, or those types of things. And I know it sounds harsh, but I don't really care anymore what anybody says or does or talks about me. I'm confident enough and feel whole enough that if they want to spend time talking about me, that just is a shame that they're, I'm going to say wasting, that they're using that amount of energy and time to not work on themselves, right? The more time they focus outward, the less time they focus inward. And that's really where people need to be. We need to sit within ourselves and be centered, and know that we can provide all of the love, all of the care, all of the self trust and self confidence that we have internally, that we don't need again, we might want it from somebody else, and it being the confidence, the self trust. No one can give us the self trust but ourselves, right? That's why it's self trust, self confidence, self worth. Nobody can give you those things, right? I often have talked about being shoulder to shoulder in a relationship, meaning being equal, being able to be vulnerable and safe in a relationship. And I think it's important within any relationship, mother and son. Doesn't mean that I'm not still in a parental role with him. It means that I can talk to him on an emotional level that's equal and try to get through a situation that he and I know that, sure, I may not have the emotional capacity that he needs of me, and he may not have it of within himself that I need of him, but we can meet in the middle and be at the same emotional capacity to get through a conversation that's emotional or hard or even great, even fun. We can still have the same things. So we don't need to do the self stuff in a negative way. We need self trust, self confidence, self worth. And self blame, that's not part of the list. Self awareness is, that's certainly one that should be there. And self awareness is great. It's where we start. It's where we start our journey, that we know that we want different. Again, I could have used the word more there, but it's different. We know we want different. We want to show up different for ourselves, for our partners, for our families, for our own well being, and for our own self-trust. And we want to have that fundamental capability and lovability pattern that we can produce our own happiness and be able to be resilient, there's a word I was looking for, enough to know that when we have all of the things, self-trust, self-awareness, self-discipline, self-awareness, and everything else, self-worth, that we can take on everything that comes to us. We can take on the toxic people. We can take on the boss that's in our ear or the conversation that's hard. We can take on all of the heavy lifting because it's lighter, because we can let it go, because we can then just extrapolate and redact what doesn't belong to us, right? We can do all those types of things. We can say, that's not mine to carry. I don't need to carry that. And as someone of service, every day and someone who cares, I want to carry a lot for people. But I can tell you, one of the most gratifying and self awareness situation is that I know that I can carry things for other people, but I also know it's much better to help them carry it for themselves, to cheer them on instead of pushing a wheelbarrow full of their stuff and asking them to get in the wheelbarrow and pushing everything to a destination that they want me to. It's a lot more gratifying to have them stand again side by side with you, hand on each handle of the wheelbarrow, pushing their stuff in a direction where they want to go and showing them eventually, maybe as the hill becomes more level, that they can do it themselves, right? That there are certainly things that they can handle and have confidence in being able to withstand and withhold their dignity, their self-pride, their self-awareness, their self-trust. And that's what we need to do, is that we need to realize our role. Again, we're the problem. What problem are we creating by showing up in a pattern that is unhealthy, that is a loop of a pattern that has come from a past situation or a past instance, right? I can certainly come into my office and have a conversation with a coworker and be in a bad mood, and the first thing I say is, "Oh, my son was driving me crazy today." No, he wasn't driving me crazy. He triggered me. That's my problem, that I allowed him to trigger me. That's a hypothetical situation, by the way. So I want to be fair to him, but that's just the situation. We tend to come into situations. And I realized that with a group of friends that I had, a family, a female group that I see often, I still am very friendly with, that I would come to the table often during our monthly and bi-monthly dinners, that I would start with a complaint about my mother, a complaint about my time back east, or the burdens that I was carrying through my life here at my own house, and what was happening internally in my own home, and using that time as a venting session, complaining about people and their behavior and how it was affecting me, until, again, through therapy and coaching and other things that I was doing in my life, I had the aha moment that yes, those things were happening. Those experiences were challenging. It was tough. It was difficult to go through a lot of emotional things. And the most difficult part was when I showed up as the problem, when I showed up and added more stress, when I added more toxicity. Let's be real, we can all be toxic. We don't have to be anymore. That's what we're here to do, is to learn how to not be toxic, learn how not to be the problem. Doesn't mean from problem to solution is a quick equation, right? It does seem that way in math, but that's not how life works. It's not linear. So we have to just decide to not be the problem. Telling you today that you have been, I have been. I can choose to be a problem within any relationship or with any situation at any given period of the time during the day, and so can you. So the main thing that we have to do is stop that. We have to stop being the problem, creating problems, stop blaming people, stop looking for other people to create happiness and things and satisfy our needs, right? We look for so many people outside of ourselves to do something, be something for ourselves, and it's not fair to them. What a huge responsibility for anybody when we put that burden onto them. But what a disservice we're doing to ourselves to want somebody to make us happy when we can't find happiness with ourselves. What a disservice to ourselves that we look for others to help us do everything emotionally, to be that emotional resource for us. As a grown woman, I wouldn't want my partner, my child, my friends, my coworkers to be my emotional being. That's not fair to them. They have their own emotions to deal with. And it's not fair to me to have somebody feel burdened by that, or to take that emotional risk on, right? Suppose they do it poorly. Then we're just blaming them again, right? It's this whole cycle. And as a grown, mature adult, I want to be a grown, powerful, mature woman that chooses the best behavior and the best reaction and the least unhealthiest. Again, we may choose some unhealthy behaviors. I don't want to say we're perfect, but we want to do that. We don't want to be a 50-year-old woman trapped in a teenage body. Did I say that right? We don't want to be, sorry, we don't want to be a teenage person trapped in a mature person's body. That's not fair. And that's how some people behave, right? I see it often, or sometimes with my clients, I see it sometimes with my coworkers and people I have relationships with. I see them behaving in a manner that seems childlike and seems reactive to things. And then they become the problem. And if I add my problem to their problem, it becomes more problems and not anything healthy. So we have to, again, I want to show up as a mature adult. I want to make mature choices. I want to be rational with my decisions. I want to be behavior centered and focused on the best outcome and healthiest outcome. I don't want to win at anything. I'm not here to be competitive all my life. That's what outside sports and outside things are, is to be competitive. We don't need to be competitive with our loved ones and with our emotions. It's a horrible place to be, in my opinion. We don't need defensiveness. We don't need stubbornness. We don't need to point fingers at anybody. We don't need to feel judged or to judge others. That's not a healthy situation either. Our society and our social optics and social media tends to have us look at ourselves through other people and what other people are doing and how they're behaving and how they're living and how performative they are and what we need to do to keep up. And it's not a place or not an authentic place for us to be, in my opinion. Again, this is all my opinion. And so we need to really realize, and again, I'll say it for the third time, but more emphatically, that we are the problem. And we need to choose to not be anymore. We need to choose not to not be the victim. I was with someone years ago who I went on a walk with them someplace. I don't remember where it was, but it was just an interesting thing that happened. And I might have talked about it in past podcasts as I'm preparing some of this runs together. And I went on a walk with this mother, female anyway. I don't know if she was a mother, but anyway. And she was complaining and she was kind of laboring a little bit with her gait and her walk and how she was having a hard time. And of course, being of care and compassionate, I asked her if she was okay and what was the problem. And she had a bad back. And I certainly can sympathize with that. I have a bad back as well. And back pain can be debilitating if anybody has it or has had it. It's not something you ever want. And it's certainly not something you wish upon anybody. It's can be life-changing, that's for sure. So I've dealt with it and I know. And so I was very empathetic, as I am, and compassionate about it and inquired about her back pain. And it's interesting. She commented on that the back pain came from a pregnancy that she had had. And I tried not to show my visible reaction to it. I tried not to externalize my eye roll or any of that type of stuff. I knew her family. I knew how old her kids were. And I realized that she was talking about a time when she was pregnant, which was probably 15 or 17 years ago. And I thought, why your back's still bothering you after that time? Either this is really significant back injury or something else. So again, being the curious cat that I am, I inquired and was like, wow, what's the back pain from your pregnancy? What was that about? And again, I was an older mom. I was 43 when I was pregnant with my son, and I was a high risk, extremely high risk pregnancy and a high risk age to give birth. And I was watched and monitored very closely. I had more tests and more ultrasounds and more probing and more hands on my body than you could imagine, and not in a fun sexual way, in a very clinical way. So I was curious about what happened with her back pain. And she said it was just a normal pregnancy, that there was nothing, he wasn't a big baby or she wasn't a big baby. It was just a pregnancy. And it stepped me back, and I didn't judge her. I didn't say, oh, what a, I said, what a shame. And again, I kept that internal. I said, what a shame that she is using something from almost, a decade and a half ago, almost 2 decades ago, to still play the victim and to not allow herself to live fully because of her back pain. And I know, again, I've had back procedures, I've had shots, I've had tons of back situations, and doctors look at stuff and tweaks throughout the years. I know that science and evidence has proven that your back, unless it's skeletal, and those things can still be fixed surgically, of course, which is, again, a hard thing to do, or maybe hard for some people, that there are remedies and there are medical systems and devices that can help with pain. Certainly not self-medication or not medication. I'm not an advocate for that at all, but certainly things that we can do or people can do to help alleviate symptoms and pain and conflict that's happening physically. So again, I felt as though that back pain she was using for her limitations around the conversation and around the walking even that we were doing was about her being the victim, that she was, it was about the pregnancy, and oh, it was him that caused it, and or them. I can't remember if it was girl or boy type thing around the pregnancy. But again, just things that I picked up. And if you step outside of a conversation and you become self-aware and self-trusting, you'll be able to listen to people differently, not more, just differently. You'll hear what they say and their stance, and you will not hear it with judgment. You'll hear it with compassion and kindness and empathy. And you'll hear it in a way that, as I tell my son, when he sees behavioral patterns that he doesn't like or doesn't want to receive, or it feels as though they're unhealthy, I say, still take them, just unpack them and realize that that's something you would never say. That's something you would never do. Just acknowledge that they came from the person that they're coming from, acknowledge their limitations, that they want to play the victim, that they are the problem, and that you're not going to contribute in the problem too. So I say that to him when he gets in a conflict with me or with his dad or with a teacher or a friend. I say, just bless the person that says it, no matter how difficult. He doesn't, we're not religious or any of that, so he hasn't come to the full impact of what blessings can be. We're learning. But I tell him, then you know what not to do. Choose the good behavior from that person. Choose the gracious things that that person does and gives, and choose to do those things and not choose the unhealthy, the tones, the emphatic behavior that you don't like. So don't present that to somebody as well. It's not, one, that, what is it? Two positives, equal a negative, right? They equal a positive, right? Two positives equal a positive. So we have to think of those things, that when one person is negative, if you add to the negative, and two negatives equal a negative, right? Misery loves company. You'll hear me say that often about things. So remember, we're all on the emotional spectrum, right? Our highs are here. It's the sunny day. It's the day that we shine. The day we want to shine, the day that we receive sunshine from others. We're receptive. We're accepting. We're not judgmental, and we're giving. More importantly, we're giving to others. We're giving to ourselves. So the spectrum is that. And when we're on the other side of the spectrum, it can be that we're down. That doesn't mean that when we're feeling down and we're feeling angry and we're feeling irritable, that we should present those things to others. That's when we become the problem again. I'm going to continually say that we are the problem. We've been the problem in situations. And I didn't realize that. I wish I would have realized it years and years and decades prior to my mother's passing. I had 3 great years with her. Of 50. I wish I had more, but neither she was ready, nor was I ready to release me being the problem. And she wasn't ready for her to not be the problem. And until we got to that point, 3 years prior to her death, that our egos came down, perhaps, that we presented ourselves as not the victim and not wanting somebody else to carry or blame somebody, that we realized that we were the problem and that we had a stake in how we were performing. I hate to use that word, but how we were showing up every day in our relationship. And we made it better by choice, by effort, and just by choosing differently. Again, that's that word, showing up differently instead of more. Of course, I wanted more for her as a mother. I wanted more for her as her daughter, but she couldn't give me more. What she gave me was different, and what I gave her was different, and it was beautiful at the end. It wasn't the kumbaya moment I dreamt of as a kid, but it was beautiful with what we both had and what we brought to the table. So again, those types of things have to come to fruition. And that's why we tend to see the same things show up in our lives. We tend to, people often say, and therapists will tell you, that you marry the parent you've never gone through the break of pattern with, right? If we have a relationship with our mother that may be unhealthy or unfulfilling or heavy or a problem, which we can be and they can be, then we tend to marry the same problem, the same person, the same everything until we break the pattern, until we realize that we don't need to manage the same problem. We don't need to be the same problem. So we tend to find ourselves in the same cycle and in the same loop, right? We can look at our friends and our coworkers and our family and see that perhaps they've done the same thing that everybody and that historically we seem to all clinically have done, which is we marry the parent that we've never resolved our conflicts with. And until we resolve them, we'll continue in that pattern. That doesn't mean that we have to divorce. That doesn't mean we have to have trauma and drama through that relationship. But it means that we need to show up differently and we need to show up as not the problem. And I'm not saying the solution because that's too much of a turn. We can't, that causes whiplash to go from a problem to solution that quickly. We just need to show up differently and be different and just not show up as the problem and certainly not the victim. And so when you hear somebody complaining and inventing around people in their lives or situations or jobs or careers or loved ones, just stop them if you can, and with love, ask them what their role is it in that situation. How can they do things differently? How can they show up differently? How can they support themselves differently in those relationships, in those situations, in that job, in that career, in that environment? How can they be different and not play the victim and stop venting? We have to do that. We have to stop talking about people and start working on ourselves. I think that's the most important thing that we can do is that we have to stop doing and looking so much outside of ourselves and start really looking inside of ourselves and experiencing things different because we show up differently, because we are differently, because we're not going to be the problem anymore. We're going to show up and not be the victim. And so those are the things that we have to do. We have to just be grounded and centered, satisfied, self-aware, self-worth, self-trust. That's where the power comes from, is being within yourself, not looking outward, not wanting anybody else to perform for us or to play a role or to satisfy our needs. We need to satisfy them ourselves. We need to look within ourselves and figure out how we can do things. Evidentially, things that do things every day that we show up for ourselves. It doesn't have to be traumatic or dramatic or huge, life-changing, evolutionary changes. It can just be 1%, as I talked about, 1% better every single day. That's what we have to do, is just show up differently. There it is again, different instead of more every single day. So that's what we have to do. We have to do that. I want you to do that. I want you to try it this week. I want you to really focus on how you're showing up. Listen to when you're the problem, because you are. Let's be real. I am too. I am starting to not be the problem in more and more places in my life. And it is a lot more fun when I'm not the problem. So, and you'll enjoy your life a lot more as well. So do that this week. Find out. Acknowledge that you're the problem. Stop being the problem. Stop playing the victim and do what you can to answer your own needs, to fulfill your own desires and your own happiness. Don't look for others to do that. It's too much responsibility and it's way too much burden for them to carry your needs as well as their own. They can't do it. Something's going to give, and it's going to give hard, and it's going to break. And you don't want that to happen either. So let's all just contribute to our lives in a healthy, satisfying way. Self-awareness, self-trust. Up on that, maybe that'll be next week's topic. It's around self-trust. I like it. And self-worth. It comes from within ourselves and not from with others. So do everything you need to, even the small things. Take a walk. Look at yourself in the mirror. Look at your eyes. Ask yourself how you're going to show up today for yourself, how you're going to behave. how you're not going to behave. That's most importantly too. How you're going to stop the triggers, stop the pain, stop the flow of past toxic patterns. Stop it, break it for yourself and break it for your kids so that they can learn from you. You can do this. We can do this together. I've done it. I'm doing it every single day. It's hard, I can tell you that. It's rewarding now. It's rewarding as hell. So thanks for showing up here today for yourself and for me. Thanks for listening. And until next time, keep chasing purpose.
Want to